Well, India has been ranked the most dangerous place in the world for women, according to a new poll by the Thompson Reuters Foundation that's ranked India ahead of countries like Afghanistan, Syria, Saudi Arabia and Somalia. The last survey was done in 2011. At that time, India was ranked number 7. But even after the December 16th gang rape in 2012 and the tougher anti-rape laws that followed, India is seen as becoming much more dangerous for women. So now it tops the list. On specifics in this particular survey, India actually ranks the worst on sexual violence against women, on human trafficking and other crimes like acid attacks, female genital mutilation, child marriage and so on. Well, joining us on NDTV today is Monique Villa, the CEO of the Thompson Reuters Foundation that conducted this particular survey. Ms. Villa, thank you for joining us from London this morning your time. It's actually quite incredible.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's actually quite incredible to see India on the top of this list, ahead of countries like Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Saudi Arabia. And honestly, my first reaction to this was, really?
Yes, I mean, I must say I was also surprised by the result, because 7 years ago, when we did our first perception poll on violence against women in most of the countries in the world, India was ranked number 4. I thought that after the outcry that existed in India and in the world indeed, after the gang rape in a bus of this student 5 years ago, things would have improved, because laws have been voted and improved, and indeed women have started to speak loud when sexual harassment or rape or things happen to them. So it was quite surprising to see that in spite of all this, India, in this perception poll, comes as the worst country for women to live in, on the 3 reasons you said, which were indeed very important: human trafficking, sexual violence, and religious or cultural attitude.
But you know, before I get to the specifics on which India has been found to be wanting, really, I just want to talk a little bit about the methodology, because again, it really does seem a little hard to believe that India would rank ahead of countries like Syria and Somalia and even Saudi Arabia, where we know that as far as women's rights are concerned, it's actually laughable. Yeah. But just to ask you on the methodology, you say that the survey involved 548 respondents.
Exactly.
And you've talked about
specialists of genders and specialists in different countries. Yeah.
So why is it that we don't know who these experts are? Do we know what countries they're from, what their background is? Because it's very generic what you've given in terms of the methodology.
I can tell you, you have, sorry to interrupt you, if I can answer. You have 41 specialists based in India, but you have 548 who have also gender specialists, academics studying these questions, social workers, etc., who know well the country. So you have a lot of Indians who really answered the poll, for India as for the other countries. The fact that it is on top of the list is not that surprising, because if you think that India is the country where there is massive infanticide of girls, and you know that the gap between men and women in India is of 37 millions. So it's a lot against women. Even before you are born, you can be killed. But after, even if the statistics have grown on violence against women in the last few years, since the gang rape in the bus in Delhi, it's essentially because women now dare to go to the police to say it. But another data that has been published by the Bar Association in India is that 70% of women don't dare to say when they are sexually harassed or raped. So, you have to balance on that. And a perception poll is a photography. It's a snapshot of a situation in a country. And what is really interesting regarding India is that when we did our first poll on violence against women 7 years ago, India was number 4. At the time, it was an outcry from everybody, because everybody said it's not possible that the biggest democracy in the world is so violent against women. And 2 years after, there was the gang rape, and all media outlets around the world used our poll because it was the only photography you had of a situation in a country. And you knew, indeed, since 2 years, that India was a country which is particularly violent against women, unfortunately. And even with the economic boom that since 2 or 3 decades now has seen this massive middle class coming into India, and where women have found jobs and have been respected for that as a breadwinner, etc., you still have a very patriarchal mindset in India, and especially in the older
So may I
rural.
ask you, because that's an important point, which is the patriarchal mindset that you talk about, because after the 2012 gang rape on December 16th, we had new anti-rape laws that were supposed to be quote unquote tougher. Now, obviously, that has not worked. That has not worked in at least deterring these crimes from happening.
Also because
maybe more people are reporting them. But are you saying then that this is something? I mean, what can governments do then? When you're faced with a challenge like this, what can governments do? Because this would then be very alarming for India to be at the top of this list.
I have this sense, and I have a big team in India, and I know this country quite a lot. I go twice a year, minimum every year. And I've seen, for instance, last year in Rajasthan, villages where children are taught their rights from very, very small. And the result is amazing. They really fight for their rights. And you can be sure these children will not be enslaved or anything. So you can do a lot of things. And I call that the 3E. You have to educate people. And when I say people, it's not only girls, it's boys. To tell them, you should respect girls exactly as you are. There is no reason why half of the population should not have the same right as the other half, the boys and the girls. So you have to teach that very soon. Then you have to empower women. And that is to say, give them access to property rights, give them access to land. You know that women in India only own 10% of the land in India. Women in the whole world only own 20% of the land in the world, which is not normal because we're half of the population. So India, on many of these indicators, which come from the World Bank, which come from many other national data also in India, show that there is a problem. There are many issues. So,
Ms. Villa,
education, empowerment, and
certainly, just to get back on the methodology for a second. Yeah. Now, you talked about various experts across the board being polled for this. Now, can I ask, how was this done, in the sense that was there any data that you were relying on from various countries? Was there official data that you were looking at, or is this just every individual expert's sort of perception, because it's a perception poll?
As I explained, a perception poll. I explained to you, a perception poll is something you do. It's like a snapshot of a situation in the world. In that case, March, April 2018. And in the last, it was the same in 2011. And so it's a snapshot. It's not the data of the government. I have all the data of the government. I have all the data of everything. But this doesn't give you the perception. And the perception is very important. As you could see, you discovered in 2011 that India was indeed a very dangerous country for women. You are this confirmed today, and things have not improved. Also, because when I speak of education and empowerment, I speak also of enforcement. So you take new laws, which India did indeed after the gang rape in the bus in Delhi. And these new laws have to be implemented. That is to say that the system of justice, which is a bit slow in India, as you know very well, has to really address the issue. So it's both education, empowerment, and enforcement. And I think the government has to play on these 3 levels.
Ms. Villa, what does, when you have a country like India, that is then ranked as the most dangerous place on earth for women, what does that do when you do a perception poll like this? How does that affect India's, let's say, perception as an economic powerhouse, as the fastest growing economy in the world? India, how does that affect perceptions?
Yeah, indeed. India is the fastest growing economy in the world. And so India is improving by day, its fight against poverty, and for empowerment. So now I think the real issue has to be to make women, give women as many opportunities as you give to men. Just imagine the potential of India if women had the same opportunities as men. It would be extraordinary. It would be in trillions of dollars. So I think this just shows the potential that India has and the urgency to address issues like violence against women, like infanticide, like child marriage. I mean, child marriage, you are the country where 27% of the Indian girls are married before the age of 18. So this is the biggest country for that. And you are 1.3 billion people. So it's on a scale that is unparalleled in other countries. Same for trafficking and slavery. India owns more than 1/3 of the slaves in the world, according to the ILO and the UN. So if you have that, how do you make that bonded labor stops, sex trafficking stops, etc.? So
right.
These are things that take time.
Ms. Villa,
that takes generations.
We're also just hearing that the Women and Child Development Ministry in India is actually, rubbishing the report, not surprisingly, saying it doesn't match what the data on the ground doesn't match what the poll says.
Yeah, I mean, there is data and there is a perception poll. As I explained, this is very different. But the perception poll gives you an instantaneous moment in time. And, the most extraordinary in this perception poll and the most surprising to me was that the US was ranked the 10th country for violence against women. And this obviously is very much the perception that specialists have around the world and in the US especially, after the Me Too campaign and after this massive outcry of women on sexual harassment, sexual violence, and also violence with the guns, etc. So you had all that together, plus a Trump administration which has completely taken as not a priority the gender question and the gender gap in the US. So of course the specialists see the US like a country where it is regressing and not progressing. So you have a lot of different perceptions. So once again, it's a perception poll. It is not data from the World Bank or from the Indian government.
Okay.
It's how 548 specialists in the world see the biggest countries in the world.
All right. Well, then there's certainly a lot for India to reflect on if India is indeed perceived as this poll says, as the most dangerous country in the world for women, ahead of countries like Somalia, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Syria.
Yes.
I mean, this is a shocker for us. I think it's a shocker.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia is a country, indeed, where women have to have a guardian to tell them if they can travel,
exactly.
if they can open a bank account, if they can do anything with their life. I have a friend in Saudi Arabia who told me she has to ask a 12-year-old son before she travels to have his authorization. So absolutely. But in Saudi Arabia, women have access to health. Women have access to finance. Women have access to education. This makes that they come only 5, where India comes first. So, you have to put everything in perspective. Of course, once again, India is a big democracy. India has such a big opportunity if they just want to give women the best chance and the same opportunities as men.
All right, Monique Villa, the CEO of the Thompson Reuters Foundation that conducted this perception poll. Thank you for joining us. And as I said, a lot for India to think about as far as this poll is concerned.